Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's lovely to be back in the House of Commons. I'd like to thank my colleague for her speech. Certainly, I'm always happy to hear about trade and new trade happening. If I think back on our Conservative government when we were in government and the 44 countries that we introduced trade deals with, I think it's wonderful. And I specifically appreciated how the member looked to the technical details of what's involved a lot of times in trade, because if we don't get those right, that can be a barrier. And so I wondered if she could comment on whether she thinks there's some ability to leverage what we learned in this specific deal so that we can deal with interprovincial trade in a better way, because many times there as well we see that it's technical differences between specifications in the provinces that are causing the barrier to trade. So I'd be interested in hearing what she has to say about that.
The honourable member for Brampton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, my honourable colleague, for this question. As you know, we went back in Canadians in the campaign and reminded them that our party is pro-free trade. We support increased trade with other countries because it's good for Canada. I see in my riding, Brampton South, how businesses and connections from all over the world benefit our economy and families when we are setting up the standard, Canada's standard, high up. That is why I'm supporting this bill and all the global work done by the Minister on this file. Thank you.
Question commentaire.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank you for your speech. Indeed, we need to praise all measures that will help SMEs deal with their issues, their everyday issues. As my colleague from Trois-Rivières said, too few of our SMEs actually do exports successfully. So it's great that Canada has signed this agreement, especially because these agreements are really designed for SMEs. Unlike, and I'd like to hear my colleague comment on this, target more investors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, my honourable colleague, for the questions. As you know, the government supports free trade as we open market for Canadians' goods and services, grow Canadian businesses, create good-paying jobs, and that will also boosting our economy and good for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to our honourable member across the way. Our industry committee is currently studying a manufacturing strategy for Canada, and we're looking at pharmaceuticals and cosmetic manufacturers, as well as people working in the food industry, and looking at the opportunities to increase export for SMEs. Maybe could the honourable member comment on the bottom line improvements that this type of an agreement could give the SMEs when they're trying to develop into emerging markets?
Member for Brampton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague for this question. As you know, our government in Canada completed the legal review and Canada European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. Our government supports free trade. It is how we open market to Canadian goods and services, grow businesses, and create high-quality jobs. CETA will remove trade barriers, give unprecedented access to the market, 500 million people, widely expand free trade between Canada and the European Union, and increase opportunity for the middle class people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Time for one more short question and response. The honourable member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for her speech today. And I heard multiple times in her speech and the comments, her answers to questions, that she supports free trade, her government supports free trade. The Trans-Pacific Partnership was drafted over a year ago. This government's had over a year to look at it. They say they've been consulting. They're continuing to consult. Are they simply going to wait until the U.S. Makes a decision on this, or is Canada and this government ready to approve this free trade agreement, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that would open up more access to 800 million people? similar to this agreement?
The honourable member for Brampton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague for this question. Yes, our government is working hard towards that. As the C-13, we fully support this bill. The TFA will increase trade by modernizing and simplifying custom and border procedure and lowering trade costs as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Reprise de débat.
Debate.